Okay, welcome to Tools in the Power Transmission course. Tools are very, very important to me. They're very, very important to you. If you're starting a career in mechatronics, they're very, very important. Having a high quality set of tools that you can count on is critical. So I'm going to do this two different ways. I'm going to first talk about the tools that are not covered in our book, our industrial maintenance book, and talk to you about how important they are. And then I'm going to talk to you about the tools that are covered in the book, and we're going to do a book review and touch on some key terms that I expect you to learn. I am not going to read most of this book. This is going to be a relatively brief overview of this chapter. This chapter is just chock full of fun facts about tools and does a really brief kind of touch on a handful of power tools. Your power tool experience is going to be much broader than what you see in the book, but there's enough in the book. Probably they've hit the 80% usage level of power tools in the book. So with that, let's switch my cameras to my overhead camera. And look, there's the book. So what is the tool that they don't cover in the book? That's probably the most important tool you can own other than your own brain and your own hands. Obviously, hands and brain. But the most important tool is a notepad, a notebook where you can keep notes on all the details, your to-do list, some drawings, details of everything that you are working on so that you don't forget it. This is a really vital tool in terms of diagnostic. It's vital for writing down part numbers and model numbers, and it's vital for coming up with a little checklist for safety or a checklist for starting up a machine. This is your most vital tool. Obviously, it's not in the book because it's sort of obvious, but that's also your most vital tool. Second tool, which is vital, which is pens. Having a good Sharpie is absolutely critical on the job. Don't ask me why. I just find out that I need a Sharpie many, many times. And having a silver Sharpie in addition to a black Sharpie lets you kind of make markings on dark colored steel that you may not be able to see with a black Sharpie. You might see a dark colored steel. A silver Sharpie will be more visible. So having a Sharpie and general writing utensils is absolutely critical as well. Also not in the book, also kind of obvious. So let's go through some of the less obvious things in the book. Knives. The book doesn't cover knives. This is not an appropriate knife to carry at work. But carrying a good pocket knife, some workplaces have regulations that keep you from carrying it, but if your workplace doesn't have a regulation from carrying a pocket knife, a small pocket knife is useful for many, many things. And it's useful for box cutters, and they have specialized electrician knives with various blades on them and extra screwdrivers in case you're away from your toolbox. That is useful, including a Swiss Army knife. I have carried a Swiss Army knife most places in my life. I currently don't really carry much in the way of knives because I'm going into schools and they don't recommend carrying knives in schools anymore like they used to. Pocket knives used to be quite a good thing. So a box cutter is a very important thing to have in your toolbox. A lighter. Smoking is not something you should do. It's very bad for you. However, having a lighter in your toolbox is useful for a variety of things. Being able to warm up a little bit of shrink tubing to shrink it down on your wire, being able to get a little extra light on your situation, also useful. Tape. Tape is a critical tool. Now, duct tape, it's like the Force. There's a light side, a dark side, and it holds the universe together. So duct tape is a very, very important tool, and this is an actual brand duct tape. Don't ask me. And electrical tape. These tapes are very, very useful for holding kind of your doors shut on a temporary basis. Don't use these for anything permanent. An electrical tape can be used as a permanent solution, but in general, these are useful to keep in your toolbox. And finally, the last class of things that the book doesn't talk about is glue. Having a good adhesive, both an epoxy and maybe an instant super glue, and then this, which is E6000, which is a contact adhesive, very important for many different applications. One thing that you're going to see in many, many machine shops is something called a Loctite adhesive that lets you put a drop of adhesive on a screw to keep that screw from backing out. And there's usually two different colors. There's blue and there's red. The blue is not meant to be permanent, so you can back that screw out by hand. The red is meant to be permanent. So that's pretty much all the classes of tools that the book doesn't cover, except one. The book doesn't cover crimping devices very well, but we'll get into that when we get to the stripping and plier section of the book. So the book says in its objectives, discuss the importance of inspecting a hand tool. All right, that is extremely important. Also, discuss the importance of use of and improper use of power tools. Also very, very important. The book actually in the content doesn't really go through them, so we're going to go through them verbally. Here, let me move my junk out of the way. Oh, I forgot one other tool which the book doesn't go through. Electronic measurement devices. In this case, this is a stud finder. This particular stud finder was purchased from Sears probably before most of you were born. Probably purchased from Sears in 1978. And it is lasted and done a really good job. There's a variety of electrical tools like the stud finder. There is voltage finders and so forth that we're also not going to get into in this particular course, including voltmeters, which is a vital tool for all of mechatronics. But you're going to get into that in other courses, so we're not going to touch that in this course. All right, so number one, wrenches. Wrenches, if you're a mechanic or doing primarily mechanical work, a wrench is absolutely vital. If you only occasionally do mechanical work, you may not want to invest in your best set of wrenches. I don't invest in my best set of wrenches because the only time I use my wrenches regularly, both the open-ended wrench, that is a wrench with an open end. Here is an open-ended wrench. And a box wrench. That's a wrench with a closed end, like these over here. The only time I find myself using my wrenches on the regular is when I'm doing automotive work. And frankly, that's only occasionally when I can't get into a spot in my vehicle with a ratchet socket head. Okay, so open and box-headed wrenches, from my experience, is not critical to have a good set. Even though I do have a good set, it's not critical to buy right away. You may want to hold off and spending a lot of money on that. Buy yourself a basic set of English and metric and then call it good until you get into your job situation and you find out. The one thing I will mention about wrenches is it's very useful when you're tightening down on a flat surface. It's very useful to have this 15-degree offset. And a lot of the wrenches standard don't have that. They're flat. This will save your knuckles a lot of damage if you get that 15-degree offset. It keeps your knuckles off the surface if you're tightening down against a big flat surface. Adjustable wrenches are absolutely vital. In fact, having a good quality adjustable wrench in your toolbox is critical. I have found that I like this particular brand. I don't even know, it doesn't even have a brand name on it. It's made in China and it comes with these red handles. And I have had this one for years and years, and I've abused it. I've beaten it up. I've used it as a hammer. You can see by the dents in the side there. I've done everything wrong with this wrench, and it still works well on and on and on. So we call these crescent wrenches, which is actually a brand name. They're not really crescent wrenches, all of them. That's a brand name of a particular wrench that I don't even think they make anymore. Mostly they're just called adjustable wrenches. Get yourself a good set. So I have a medium, I have a small one, I have a medium and a large one, and I have a very, very big one. If you're going to put one in your toolkit, I would suggest this one with a maximum opening size of about 1 inch and a length of about a 9-inch length on the handle. This is a really good toolbox size. Actually, this is called Companion brand. So I like this wrench a lot, and I've abused it, and it keeps working well for me. The downside to a crescent wrench is you have to be careful that you adjust it for every time you tighten down on a nut or a bolt properly. If you let it just open a little bit bigger than the nut that you're working on, it will potentially damage that nut, and the book takes you through some of that. Then there's some oddball wrenches, like if you're doing plumbing work, you'll need a flare nut wrench. You can read about that. It's used for brass fittings, which are primarily used in plumbing, both hydraulic as well as water, as well as other things. So read about that in the book. A good set of socket wrenches is critical. I still have my Craftsman socket wrenches from 20, 30 years ago, and they work great. If you are doing automotive work, a good, extremely high quality socket wrenches is absolutely critical and worth every penny for the best you can buy if you're using them every day. I don't use my socket wrenches every day. If I'm on the job doing maintenance work, I might use them 2 or 3 times a week. In my current workshop, I might use my socket wrenches 2 or 3 times a month. So I don't need the highest quality anymore, even though my old Craftsman still work pretty well. You will see that I don't optimize, I don't value the absolute highest dollar like Snap-on. I think it's useful to have, if you're using a tool every day, to have a really good quality tool that won't break, but I don't see it as a smart move to buy the most expensive version of a tool. A torque wrench. Very often you can get a torque wrench in with your socket wrench sets. A torque wrench is absolutely critical for doing automotive work anymore. You want to make sure that you don't tighten down your spark plugs any more than their rated torque. Otherwise, you may snap the plug, or you may get it so tight down in the hole that you can't get it out again if you ever need to change it. So spark plug is absolutely critical to get in there right with the torque wrench. And virtually any part on an engine and many, many other parts in your vehicle are going to be rated to be tightened down to a certain torque. So that lets you set the tightness to a particular torque value. A lot of equipment now you buy, if you do any repair on it, you have to certify that you maintain the right torque. So this is not critical. This is in the third category where it's not critical. You don't always need it, but if you're doing mechanical work on vehicles or in any kind of certified machinery, you will need this for your workplace. I wouldn't suggest you buy a torque wrench right up front. I would wait until see if you really need it in your workplace. And to be honest, I currently don't have a torque wrench. I went looking for one the other day. I couldn't find it. So I'm planning to go replace my torque wrench, and I just haven't done that yet. Okay, next category, screwdrivers. Screwdrivers are probably number 2 of important things to keep on hand. And there are some aspects of screwdrivers which are absolutely critical for the mechatronics world. So first of all, I'll go through what the book talks about screwdrivers. Book hits the basic mechanics screwdrivers, which are your stubbies, your square shank, which include your flathead square shank. Square shank screwdrivers means that you've got a square profile to the shank, which is the shaft of the screwdriver. That means I can put a wrench on that shaft and I can get a lot of torque on that screwdriver. Now, that's also how I can screw up the tip. As you can see, this tip has just got a slight twist to it. It's not twisted enough that I can take it back to, I guess Lowe's is doing Craftsman now, and replace it, but it's just got a slight twist to it, which means that I torqued the snot out of this screwdriver at some point in its life. A round shank screwdriver is the same kind of screwdriver, but you can't put a wrench on it. They tend to be a little bit cheaper, round shanked screwdrivers. Here's an example of round shank, and here's an example of round shank. These particular screwdrivers are absolutely vital for the mechatronics world, and this one too. Having a really good, high quality, hardened steel, number 2 Phillips, round or square shank, in this case Phillips are almost always round shank, is absolutely vital. Many, many pieces of equipment have this particular Phillips head drive, that star looking slot as absolutely vital. Another thing you need is a tiny flathead screwdriver. Notice this flathead screwdriver has got a very narrow profile. That is used to work on terminal blocks. I can unscrew and tighten terminal blocks for doing wiring. So having a really high quality, in this case, it's a very high quality German screwdriver specifically designed for either very large pairs of glasses or doing terminal block work, and having a very high quality Phillips head in that same size range as well. Very, very important. These are all very, very important to have. This is probably number 2 in importance for the mechatronics, maybe even number 1. As well, if you have a small toolbox or carry toolbox and you want to have a lot of bits, and actually most of the bits have fallen out of this one, you can buy yourself a ratchet screwdriver that lets you pop in a bit on any number of bits that all fit into one package. In fact, this is what I recommend for your beginner kit. And to go with that, you can get some socket head bits. And I don't know that the book talks about them a lot. I think it mentions them briefly. These socket head bits are inexpensive from, I think, Harbor Freight. They're pretty, they're easy to grab the right size based on the color, and they've got magnets inside so they can hold the screw or the nut that you're driving. If it comes out, it'll stay in the socket so it won't drop down inside your machine. Or if you're putting it in, you can pop that screw or nut into the socket and then install it. So that is very, very important from a screwdriver perspective.